A Myanmar court sentences 4 reporters and the chief executive of the Unity Weekly News to 10 years in prison with hard labor. The journalists are imprisoned after they reported the military is operating a chemical weapons factory under the instructions of former strongman junta chief Tan Shwe. The journalists were arrested in February, days after the article was published. Myanmar's military ruled the country with an iron fist for nearly 5 decades, imprisoning critics and journalists. A new quasi-civilian regime came to power in 2011 and instituted reforms that included freeing political prisoners and lifting censorship, but rights groups are concerned about press freedom after several cases of criminal prosecutions against journalists. The United States and China failed to resolve issues on cyber spying and maritime disputes after 2 days of high-stakes talks. The two countries met for the 6th annual Strategic and Economic Dialogue. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry hits China with what he describes as the, quote, chilling effect of internet hacking on U.S. businesses. Washington earlier indicted 5 Chinese military officers for hacking into U.S. companies. Chinese State Councilor Yang Jiechi says cybersecurity is a, quote, common threat and challenge facing all countries. Beijing also insists it is a victim of hacking and accuses Washington of hypocrisy since it conducts sweeping surveillance around the world. The two sides also disagree on how to resolve tensions in the South and East China Seas, despite Washington's warnings that Beijing risks triggering conflict. Yang insists, quote, China is committed to upholding its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights. Despite differences in opinion, Kerry says the two sides agreed on achieving a, quote, denuclearized, stable and prosperous Korean peninsula and fighting climate change. Football fan Pope Francis might watch the World Cup final between his native Argentina and Germany on Sunday, Monday morning in Manila. But the Vatican says it's unlikely he'll watch the game beside his German predecessor, Benedict XVI. Pope Francis is said to be a fan and card-carrying member of the San Lorenzo de Almagro Football Club since childhood. Benedict XVI, whose interest lies in classical piano, is not a football fan. Vatican officials say he has never sat through a football game in his life. But this hasn't stopped a few jokes from doing the rounds ahead of the big game in Brazil. Italy's Rai News made a photo montage with an image of the two popes kneeling side by side, except that each is depicted praying for his team. Conscious of his role as head of the Catholic Church, Francis has been careful not to make any predictions about the World Cup. But according to one news agency, Francis reportedly declined an offer from the Swiss Guards to watch the Argentina-Switzerland game, saying there would be a war. Let's now look at Rappler's Rap for today, a list of the 10 most important events around the world you shouldn't miss. At number 6, Germany expels the chief of the United States Secret Services station in Berlin after uncovering 2 cases of spying by the Americans. The discovery happened as public anger simmered following the allegations by fugitive Edward Snowden that the U.S. National Security Agency wiretapped the phone calls of German Chancellor Angela Merkel. And at number 9, the 2014 Emmy Awards nominees are announced, delighting TV fans and disappointing some. Popular series like Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, and House of Cards are nominated for Outstanding Drama Series, while The Good Wife was left out. For the full top 10, visit Rappler.com/wrap. The newest performing arts collective in Manila, the Sandbox Collective, presents Danny Girl, a musical about a battle against cancer. Through the eyes of a child, the musical asks important questions about God, family, and the brutalities of disease. G. Tonji reports.
There's a new musical in town, one that's told from a young girl's perspective, that questions why cancer. 9-year-old Danny Girl is battling leukemia, but instead of giving up, she goes on a fantastical journey to find her hair. Danny Girl is an off-Broadway musical with book and lyrics by Christopher Diamond and music by Michael Kuhlman. Director Toff de Venecia tells us about the Sandbox Collective, the newest theater company in town, and why it's doing Danny Girl.
And if you cater or spoon feed, then what exactly are you adding to the conversation? If you replicate, then how are you progressing as not just as like a community, but also as a nation? So it's these things that we took into consideration. And the music's beautiful.
Theater actor Reba Tadero, who plays 14 characters in the musical, says the story strikes a chord in modern society. To him, Danny Girl is very personal.
It hits very close to home because I lost my grandmother to cancer. That was 13 years ago. That Danny being naive is actually what drives it even, further home. That when a child is experiencing this, how does she deal with it? Instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna die, oh my God. No, she's looking for her hair. Because to a child, the first impulse is always, oh no, I'm not gonna get to play anymore. Instead of, to an adult, it's, oh, I'm gonna die. It's very, very different.
In the game of life, you have to know how to spin. In the game of life, you simply never. The musical explores universally salient themes such as life, in the face of death, and the power of a child's imagination. It's Danny Girl's positive perspective that will leave audiences with an uplifting experience at the theater. Danny Girl, a musical good for the soul. Jitanji, Rappler, Manila.
Every story in Rappler has a mood meter, which gives you 8 emotions to choose from. Click how you feel and your vote comes down to the Mood Navigator in the middle of the front page, which crowdsources the mood of the day. It also gives you the top 10 stories with the most clicks. It's a pretty negative day on our Mood Navigator today. We only have a few stories that stand out. This one, our top story right now, Australian ISIS supporter nabbed in Cebu, 87% happy. This other story about the World Cup, Vatican says no to popes. No to popes final for the World Cup, 92% amused. Most other stories on our Mood Navigator are red stories. This one, a story that broke in the afternoon, China hits the Philippines over extended oil drilling activities, 88% happy. And the story that got the most number of votes today, our top story in the morning, Aquino rejects Abad resignation, 47% angry. All these votes contributed to the mood of the day. Today, most people are angry. That's Rappler's newscast for today, Friday, July 11, 2014. Visit Rappler.com and watch our newscast Monday to Friday. Tell us how you feel on our mood meter and help us crowdsource the mood of the day. I'm Paterno S. Maquel. As we say at Rappler, tomorrow begins today.